right, we're going to let people trickle in a little bit here, but good morning from Economic Alliance, Snohomish County. Welcome to Coffee Chat. I just want to see how many of you actually have coffee today. Anybody have coffee today? Yeah, okay. All right, well, we'll let folks roll in a little bit here, and let's at least get started with some initial intro information. Good morning, everyone. My name is Gary Clark, President CEO of Economic Alliance, Snohomish County, and I am here to welcome you to our coffee chat, where we advocate, develop, and connect. So I have my Starbucks today, and it's a chai tea, so don't make fun of me because I have a chai tea. All right, folks. First things first, we are going to talk about housekeeping, which means make sure that you have put your organizational name on the chat so that we can recognize who you're with when you make remarks or comments. As well, we love a very engaging audience, so please ask questions, make comments. This is going to be a very entertaining and thought-provoking conversation. Outside of that, this will be recorded and you will have an opportunity to view it later as well. Okay. With that being said, this is the fun part for me. I get to introduce these two amazing marketing gurus and then step outside of the way for some great conversation. First off, we have Randall Southam from Southam Creative, and he's a partner at the Snohomish County-based firm, the Southam Group, who enjoys the role of creative director on the company's media services team, Southam Creative. You've likely seen the company's work here in Snohomish County as they've supported economic development efforts, including Arlington Awaits. Their team represents the exceedingly successful campaign for the Cascade Industrial Center. Before the pandemic, the team at Southam Creative produced medium and large scale in-person conference events, and today find themselves in the unique position of producing those same events online for a customer base that exists primarily in the Western United States. Randall serves on the board of directors for the Arlington Fly-In, is a lifelong Washingtonian, and today joins us from his office in Breyer to share his perspective on where we're at and where we're going. Secondly, last but not least, is Matt Kale. I know those of you who love kale like me, so I think it's an awesome name. Matt is a Northwest native, a UW alum, and past TEDx speaker who regularly presents to private, public, and other groups. His company, Supercharged Marketing, provides digital marketing services to various businesses. Please give a warm welcome to Randall and Matt. Randall, take it away.
Good morning, everybody. Let me share my screen here. Okay, you should be able to see my screen okay. Thanks for the nice introduction, Gary. And special thanks out to Katie, Lisa, and everyone over at EASC for hosting these coffee chats. We're a partner of the Economic Alliance, and like all of you, I'm a regular audience member to these events. I found them to be engaging, helpful, and they've provided a consistent way for us to stay connected and informed as we've all endured the last 14 months or more. It's good to see that Matt Kale will follow me today as our keynote speaker, which means we're deploying the model of any good show: start shallow and finish deep. I'm going to cover these three areas in my comments this morning. First, a 2-minute background on our company, our experience over the past year, and the data we're seeing that ultimately shapes the perspective that I'm sharing with you today. You'll hear some advice as I move through my slides, and I hope this is helpful. I'll try and draw some conclusions, and of course, I'll stick around for the Q&A session following Matt's presentation. Recently, I worked with Katie at the Economic Alliance and with Angie and her team over at Snohomish STEM on the production of a live online event known as STEM Summit 2021. Following that event, Katie asked me if I would talk about our perspective of doing business online post-pandemic. And everyone's been impacted in a unique way by COVID-19. So I want to stress that our perspective that I'm sharing this morning is just one of over 600,000 perspectives in Snohomish County alone. As a business, we're fortunate to have weathered the storm of 2020, and today we're experiencing a resurgence. But by 2022, we expect our company to only slightly resemble the team we were in 2019. Like everyone on today's call, we've had to adapt, and without this flexibility to adapt to what's important to our customers, we would have been left behind. So my comments are based on our experience and what we're placing our bets on going forward. As Gary mentioned, our parent company is a Southam Group. Over the past couple of decades, we've developed core competencies across 9 disciplines shown here. We often joke that we're like an Italian or Mexican restaurant. We only have 9 ingredients. We just mix them differently to meet our customers' wants and needs. Let's face it, when you're eating a tostada at taco time, you're eating a taco. It's just in another shape and form, but it's all got the same ingredients. So for sales lead generation and to be easier to be found by our prospective customers, as well as to identify with their business, we deploy specialty brands in our customer development channels. However, it always gets back to the same core ingredients. Our revenue mix between online services and in-person events has traditionally been about 70-30. So when we total up our revenue buckets into our general ledger, they fall into these categories. And I wanted to share this with you because when we look back at these revenue streams over time, which we're about to do, they tell us a story of what we see as likely to be the biggest change in doing business over the next couple of years. So let's talk about our financial pandemic story. Here we can see before pandemic and after pandemic. The quarter prior to pandemic, all of our numbers were consistently up. The economy was booming. But like everybody here, pandemic struck us hard. When Governor Inslee shut things down, our team fell in the non-essential services category. All clients suspended services, or we were forced to suspend services simply for not being able to deliver them. So for over 5 months, our studio was dark, our offices were closed, and honestly, we just held our breath. In many cases, our managers decided to suspend billing for customers for services we were contractually entitled to invoice for, really because we were more interested in the survival of the customer than we were in the next invoice. It was elements of the CARES Act that were the enabling factor that kept us and many of our customers afloat. So as we tried to resume operations over the third quarter last year, we sputtered. It wasn't just a matter of our clients getting back to work or their willingness to get back to work. We had to sell our own team on the idea that we were a safe place to work, that we took the public health situation very seriously, and we could be trusted to enforce the rules. To make things a little more unstable, our customers were hedging their bets, not sure when was going to be the right time to resume projects. So one of the strongest indicators in our wheelhouse when it comes to online behavior is this blue section right here. It represents our broadcasting and streaming services. This category of revenue in our company didn't even exist in 2019. But by the end of this year, these services will represent a significant revenue stream in our company. So like you, now we have to forecast the future. To do that, we look beyond the deals we're booking, the conferences we're signing, and we look at how revenue numbers inform us. We look at human behavior and what's driving that human behavior. Our first assessment is what our local health district is projecting. Here in Snohomish County, the health district gives us 3 scenarios from best to worst. Here we see that if Snohomish County were to receive 47,000 doses per week, the entire county will be vaccinated by August. And we see this as great news because with a large percentage of the population vaccinated and summer heat prevailing, infection rates will fall. We believe consumer confidence will rise. And before the end of the year, we could be looking at something that actually resembles a normal life. In the health district's second projection, if dose distribution falls just 11,000 doses per week, down to 36,000, we're looking at mid-October in the new school year before we achieve this milestone. And in the worst case projection, with only 25,000 doses per week in distribution, the problem and or the public's perception to the problem is going to continue to drive online behavior for the foreseeable future. Then we look to the national trends, where this week, the news is that half of all Americans have received at least 1 shot, and a quarter of all Americans are fully vaccinated. Our determination based on local and national news is optimistic. Revenue is up, people are going back to work, kids are going back to school, and our perception is that a year from now, this will largely be behind us. However, We also believe that online behaviors that have developed over the past 14 months are going to persist in a number of ways, driven by a number of factors. When it comes to in-person events versus online events, we all have to recognize that the past year or more has been traumatic. Our lives have changed, and many have been living in fear. This is not going to end simply when Dr. Fauci tells us to take our masks off. And if you think that you're not a victim of this effect, just ask yourself, how would you feel about going to a Seahawks game today in a full stadium? Or how about going to a concert this weekend with 25,000 of your neighbors all sitting in an enclosed stadium? Would you be comfortable with that today? How about next month? How about December, next year? In our judgment, the psychological effects of the pandemic trauma will take at least 2 years to overcome. And we believe it's going to continue to drive online behavior. And even if we didn't have trauma, we're faced with the reality that Zoom and online meetings are here to stay. And even if you want to take the drive to meet in person, it doesn't mean that your colleagues share that feeling. So I want to come back to this human behavior reflected in data here. What our customers are saying is that it doesn't matter what they think. It only matters what their customers think or their audience think and what that audience wants and is comfortable with. And as you can see here, the jump in online events, even when the event is happening in person, is huge. So all of us have to continue to connect with our audience, no matter what that looks like, in person or online. Relationships are the key to success for any organization, public, private, government, nonprofit, you name it. For nonprofits, staying connected to their audience is key not only to serving their audience, but to generating revenues that are necessary for them to remain relevant or even exist. So what makes us think that a substantial percentage of your audience is going to stay remote? Let me share with you a real world example of what we just experienced last year. Being in the media and creative services industry, we're partners with Adobe, and they play a big role in our workflow and the results that we deliver to our customers. It's essential every year that our leadership team, at a minimum, attend Adobe's global creative conference known as Adobe Max. It's a fantastic event every year that inspires and challenges us, but it also comes at a cost. As you can see, by the time we get done with all of the correlated expenses, sending someone to Adobe Max in San Diego, for example, is a significant expense. If we want to send 10 people, well, that's the cost of a new company truck. So just the reality of this simple math, we believe, will drive many of us to continue to participate remotely in these traditional in-person events. So if your audience is going to stay home, it doesn't mean that they're gone. We just have to find new ways to reach them. We have to adapt to the new online world of events, meetings, and event fundraising that traditionally have been conducted in person. Between expenses and trauma, we believe that online behaviors we're seeing today will persist for the foreseeable future. And we can't just send an email and expect the audience to show up either. We have to entice them with exciting promos that they convey, exciting programs that will convey that they're going to get just as great an experience online as if they had punched a ticket at the door. Since I mentioned STEM Summit 2021 a couple of slides back, let me play for you what I mean about getting someone excited to stay engaged. So as you can see, that promo is meant to convey that this won't be just a group of Zoom zombies going through the motions. These types of promos are currently and will continue to drive human behavior as we move forward in time. So what are we seeing right now? A couple of more indicators driving online behavior in our immediate future. Every event that our company currently has on the calendar, unless it's a movie in the park event, has added broadcasting to the event as a service. All of our customers recognize that a substantial part of their audience is not ready or willing to jump back into the rink. And in the next couple of slides, I'd just like to show you what pent-up demand looks like. People want to travel. I would buy travel stocks if I were you. Together in Tucson is a national event we're producing later this year. During the first quarter of 2021, the executives in the organization struggled with whether or not to even plan an in-person event. It's a big risk putting on a large event that has tangible financial consequences if the event fails to draw people. We got to put heads in beds. That's the mantra of most events. Upon deciding to do the event in Tucson and releasing it sold out immediately. We can't even promote the conference location because the resort is sold out. Like our other events, the client has moved to stream the event online, and this broadcasting not only dramatically expands the audience, it creates a new revenue stream. So let's come back home and let's look local at one of our smaller local charity events. They are experiencing the same thing with phase 3 limitations on social gatherings. Their event sells out right away, and they have to turn to online options to bring their remote audience in and give them the same experience of inclusion and belonging. This is an online reaction to the new behavioral norms of the organization's audience. Along with the security that is derived from a sense of safety in public, generating new revenue streams will remain the leading factor in driving online behavior. Look at us all sitting here online today, absent from the early morning drive and hotel coffee that just 18 months ago we would have counted on. So today I've shared a little bit about our company and the methodology we're using to predict human behavior over the next few years and how it will continue to drive online behavior. I want to encourage you to find new ways to reach your customers, your audience. If things have slowed down, take this time to work on your digital assets, your website, your brand, your story, what we call your digital face, so that as we emerge from these crazy times, you'll be perceived as healthy and just as relevant as ever. People want to hear your story, find ways to tell it to them. And most importantly, as Teddy Roosevelt said, stay in the ring and keep fighting. I hope that my comments have been a little bit helpful this morning, give you some insight of how we're approaching the coming years and how we're adapting to the new normal to help our customers confront the realities of the new normal. I am pleased now to turn over the podium and the screen share to our keynote speaker, Matt Kale, who will share with us his perspective of the online world post-pandemic. My contact information is on the screen, and I'd welcome hearing from anyone today if you're looking for some help on the path forward as we emerge from COVID-19. So Matt, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Great. No, thank you very much, Randall. And here, actually, I'll get my screen share going. All right. That's actually an excellent segue because especially at the end there about kind of your particular digital face, your presence is very much kind of the focus of what I'll be kind of talking about in regards to a couple of different matters, your online presence as we move into a post-pandemic world. Just real quickly about us, yeah, we're a local digital marketing shop. We work in a lot of the areas that we're speaking about. I actually really enjoy things like this because it's very much, it's more interactive. And in a Zoom world, we'll kind of take what we can get. I look forward to actually getting back on stage and behind podiums and talking and meeting to you, meeting you folks again in person. All right, so I'm gonna actually hit on a couple of areas that we have seen both in the pandemic and also coming out of the pandemic. And that is when we went into this strange world, everything got turned upside down. We suddenly heard what I would call a change in objections. Up until that point, and this happens when the economy is good, people were too busy. They didn't have time, which is a translation, of course, towards most any business. They didn't want to make the time because the online presence wasn't as much of a priority. This led to a lot of really scary websites where you had to think exactly how many years ago in the footer it had been since they last had touched their website. And we're talking upwards of a decade or more. And this was commonplace. Sites that were outdated, sites that were scary. My kids are always willing to help out with a slide. So in this case, this was them helping out with something they thought would be scary for one of the slides with the skeleton. And this was unfortunate, and this put these businesses at a disadvantage when we went into the pandemic because the website remains an online hub for your business. When you think about the versatility of websites, there's nothing more that can do more for your business. Virtually everything can be tied into it. Anything from social media to events to online ads, everything can basically go back to that central website. So that was a problem immediately the businesses faced. We went into a pandemic and suddenly there was all this new energy going towards the online world and their websites were not ready for it. Oddly enough, as we had some of our clients who are struggling in certain ways, we had a bunch of other businesses who were coming off of the shelf, who were basically saying, hey, I guess this, after years, sometimes in certain cases of talking to them, that their websites were important and they should pay more attention. And it had been about a decade since they last redesigned them. We suddenly had several of these businesses contacting us saying, hey, we're closed physically and people are trying to use my website and it's crashing or it's hacked or they can't view it on their smartphones. All these different problems. So there was a mass revelation, which is good. And going actually out of the pandemic, I think that there's just an increased awareness of the value of online presence we just didn't have before because we've had to rely on it so much for the past year. But this does beg the question, does your website right now reflect your current operating status? This is a changing target. We've had some clients where we worked with them last spring into summer and things have changed since then and they haven't updated to where you would know that. You would know that they have things like curbside pickup or limited space in their place of business where they actually are seeing people with certain quotas in mind. The other question is, are you then set up to reflect any product to service changes? That's changed going into the pandemic. It's likely still changing. And certainly as we move out of the pandemic, when we start having these different phased approaches, that's going to change yet again. Is your site set up to reflect the latest news? Because if it's not, a lot of people visiting aren't going to see that. And they're going to think that you're 6 months ago. Or they might even wonder if you still have an old site. They might even wonder if you're still actually around in business. Many people have pivoted to where they're offering their services online. And one of the changes we expect not to go away is to be able to have that online form of service. Now, that doesn't have to mean just like an e-commerce store either. It can be other types of online signage, just more ways where people can do what they want without being able to physically come into a location or even getting on the phone. That change in behavior, that online convenience is something we only see increasing further. And the pandemic has kind of given a little bit of a boost. Now, when people talk about how they might refresh something like a website, there are various options, and I don't have anywhere near enough time to kind of go through and counter them. I will say that there are many options out there, even that didn't exist 5 years ago. The commercials that promise to be able to build a professional site over a lunch break, those are overpromising, that's true. But there are more tools available than there used to be, and a lot more to pick from if you're doing it independently or working with a designer, just so where you don't have to feel nearly as held hostage. If you remember the websites that had 30 to 50,000 lines of code, and if you didn't know how to code, you couldn't change. That's not the world we're in. And these products have all been taking advantage in trying to make rebooting, redesigning websites even easier in a pandemic world. This is just one quick example. And what this actually site example, what it illustrates is wanting to be able to do more online. This particular client wasn't available to meet in an office and oftentimes wasn't available by phone, at least not consistently. So for this particular site, they wanted online sign up. All they want to do, they want to do estimates. And one of the things that we saw last year is that while some industries were having enormous trouble, the home industries, those that were ready to take advantage, everything from remodeling to plumbing to electricians to handymen to painters, if they were positioned properly, 2020 was an incredibly strong year for many of those businesses. And it started with people being able to go online, which is what they were doing stuck at home, and being able to sign up for a free estimate right through the website to where they could pick the day and time that worked for them. They didn't have to talk to anybody. They didn't have to go anywhere. They didn't have to do anything besides pick that time and click book. And then at that particular time, they would show up fully masked, distanced, and they would be able to get their estimate. And this, this set off a boom for the businesses that did this. They're still booming now, but it was remarkable that by middle of the summer, we were seeing these numbers from clients where their 2020 numbers were beating 2019. And it all went back to that they were set up online to take advantage. And as we come out of this and as the storefronts open, that's a convenience people are still going to want. They're going to want to go on. They're going to want to be able to book whatever they want and leave the rest. One thing that did not stop last year and has even been worse this year has been the scourge of hacking. And while a lot of sites and online presences were changing, one of the things that still is not nearly as consistent as it should be is a good security, effective security for your online presence. And that starts with having a security certificate. This is the HTTPS up in the address bar. That's one. And the second thing is making sure that a browser gives your site a padlock. When people go onto your site and they don't see the padlock, or their browser warns them that the site may not be secure, we've all gotten that, they're clicking back as quickly as they can. And the site may not even be hacked. You are essentially foregoing a ton of traffic. And this was another common area of emphasis we saw last year and has continued into this year, but just way too many sites still don't do this. I mean, at this point, Google dings your site in search rankings if it's not secure. So it's something where it's always good to go. Double check your site URL address. Can you get to it in an insecure fashion? Do you have the padlock? Chrome is probably the most meticulous of the browsers for this, if you want to really put it through the ringer. One other thing, this is not specifically pandemic related, but was one of the big trends of 2020 and has continued on in 2021. And that is to ask, is your web presence accessible? Now, by accessibility, I mean accessible to differently abled Americans, an online version of the ADA, if you will. And what this is that there is an increasing expectation. And if you're actually looking for a clear law or regulation around this, you won't find it. A bill had been introduced in the last Congress, a bipartisan bill that has not been passed. The bottom line is that the Supreme Court declined to take a case, which basically said that websites should be accessible. So we're kind of stuck in this limbo. What this also means is that there have been lawsuits that have gone after websites that are not accessible. And there have been settlements of various ranges. I'm not a lawyer, but what I do know is that there appears to be increased legal exposure if your website is not accessible, which then begs the question, well, how do I even know if my website's accessible? This is the first or second time I've even heard of this. If you actually look up the WAVE Web Accessibility Evaluation Tool, that can give you one indication. It's not perfect, but it's something, again, you can Google and quickly run through your site, and then it'll come back in all the different ways that your site is or is not accessible. I know we've been working with a variety of clients integrating tools which essentially create an accessible version of the site. If you want a local example, go to Como 4 News, and you'll see actually there'll be a blue floating icon in the lower left of the screen. That is website accessibility. And you can see actually different people that may actually have trouble seeing different types of colors or font sizes or other different types of things, that this tool all helps make your website more accessible. This is something, again, which kind of happened independent of the pandemic, but became really important. And we're seeing a lot more emphasis being put on this, particularly on websites. So over in the social, the short news is seeing a spike on social of a sort and past mistakes. We've been in business long enough to where we've seen past economic downturns and upturns. And in the downturns, a lot of businesses will cut back. They'll cut back on online advertising. They'll cut back on social media presence. And we saw this again last year. And we also saw brands that did the opposite, that kept the content going or even kept the advertising going, even if it was a smaller amount. And those businesses already have been bouncing back faster, which is the exact same pattern from 2009, 2010. That those that kind of kept a seat at the table, even if it was a limited one, have been doing better because they have still spent the effort to build that brand awareness and engagement. Whoops, sorry. Closed. A lot of social media profiles, their last update was from March 2020, and that they were closing, at least temporarily, due to restrictions on the pandemic. And that was their last social media post. These businesses are still open. They are still operating, but you would not know it if you went onto their Facebook page, their Twitter account, any of those places at all, because that was the last that they posted. Or they posted the last summer that they might be open in a limited way with more information coming soon, and they never posted any additional information. This is going to be a big problem in the next year where a lot of people are going to assume based on social media presence that your business is closed, that is no longer active because your last Facebook post was right when the pandemic was at its worst. And yet social activity has been increasing. Even like the one, Facebook is ginormous. It only has so much more room for growth. It still actually grew year over year from 2019 to 2020. So these social media profiles continue to have a lot of energy and attention being spent on them, and they're checking out businesses. We saw that accelerate in the pandemic, and that's not going away. People are relying more than ever on whatever they find online. And social media presences, if they have active content, can be a great way to get automatic top 10 search engine results. So we continue to ask questions on social media. Questions like, how is the pandemic still impacting your business? How are you offering services? How are you open? What exactly are you doing? Are there precautions that you're taking? People like hearing about things like frequent wipe downs, about curbside access only, about staggered arrivals and departures, about exposure notification services. All those types of things give people peace of mind. And yet a lot of businesses are not posting about that still. But those that are seeing a lot of engagement. I would say more engagement than before the pandemic because people really are after this information. But ultimately, it has to be good, authentic content. And this is the thing where people who are inauthentic in the pandemic, I mean, that was always bad. But since then, it's become even worse. So I always say, if you're going to be posting this online content, both now and coming out of this, then you need to think about what are the themes, what are the topics that really speak to you, your organization. And that's where you need to live and work. Being if whoever's developing the content for you, it needs to speak to that. It can't be high level, it can't be generic, it can't be salesy, because nobody likes salesy, and even actually less so in a pandemic. You're basically the worst image of an aggressive salesperson when you are that way online. And especially whenever things are kind of heavy, more serious in the world, pandemic, trying to come out of it, people have even less patience for that than ever before. Okay, last but not least, the question is, do you look good online? As we're coming out of this, how do people see you when they find you? We've already talked about with closed physical locations, people rely on internet searches more than ever before, and that change behavior is not going to change. That's not going to suddenly bounce back, at least not directly. And the younger generations anyway do this as a matter of course, and even they increase that behavior even more. So what shows up in those search results? Do you know? Do you know what people are talking about your business? And you have to understand their different results. Sometimes people will panic when they actually don't show up in the paid results, even though they don't have a Google Ads campaign going on. Don't worry about that. If you don't have a physical location, maps are going to be less important. If you do, maps are going to be very important. And oftentimes having incorrect addresses, especially because things have changed in the pandemic. Addresses have changed or moved, and yet people are still going to the old location. You're missing business, and they just haven't reached out to tell you yet. And then down the organic search results. Is it your business that shows up? Is it that incredibly outdated website or a social media profile? How do you look? Because they're likely going to click on the top one to three results that they see. One note is that we have seen the clients of ours, and actually other businesses for that matter, who are active on Google My Business, Google Business, depending on the name or the search you run, have seen a lot of good attention from that. If you have a location or if you have a service area and you haven't set up a Google Business profile, it's a great way to raise your online profile automatically. I'll throw my own business out there just as an example. Over there, actually in the red bar or the red box, that is just the Google Business, my Google Business profile. There's nothing special about that. There's no advertising behind that. That is just because I'm active on Google Business, and I've set it up properly. You can even see my preferred service area. So all those things are at your business's fingertips, and they're all things that people are going to continue to look for. And again, as we open up, they're still going to be wanting to know. If anything, map searches and physical locations will increase further as people can actually come to your location again. Just a couple more points. And one is when you're looking at your business online, you want to make sure that you're following the NAP method, name, address, and phone. And that these are consistent everywhere, that they look exactly the same on Facebook as on your website, as on any other place that you are, any membership directory, anywhere else. This is consistent because those are all signals to Google that this is indeed the same business. Okay, and just last but not least, when people find you online, they're likely going to see reviews. Do they like the reviews? One of the pandemic activities that many have focused on is collecting more positive reviews, collecting those who are really happy, who love what you do, and yet no one would ever know because they've never posted a review for you. That can be on Google Business, they do reviews. Also Yelp, I know they have a mixed reputation, but they are a big review center. And there are other places too. But the question is, when people go on there and they see those reviews, do those reviews reflect your business? Do they reflect the latest products and services that you're also offering? The bottom line is that the last 12 months did turn the world upside down. And now as we come out of it, some of it's going to be turned right side up, which itself is another disruption and a huge change. Your online presence, be it your website, your social media presence, or just how people see you online, is going to need to remain nimble. It's going to need to be remain changeable. If it changed last spring and summer, great. It's probably due to where it needs to change again. And you just need to try to keep up on that as we move into this post-pandemic world and whatever that new normal looks like, to make sure that your online presence can best take advantage of it. So it's just a quick actually shot of three children and a dachshund sheltering in place. They can't wait to get their shots. And with that, actually, I will be quiet and we will turn it over to Q&A.
All right. Well, thank you, Matt, and thank you, Randall. I think what we'll do here is we'll ask an initial question, and those of you who are still with us, please feel free to ask questions in the chat. But first things first, this one's for you, Randall. We'll start it off. When you were talking about online events, you mentioned new revenue streams as a driver for the future growth in online events. Can you please give us some examples of this?
Yeah, sure, you bet, Gary. So let's look at the first conference I talked about, the Together in Tucson conference. Sold out, right? By adding that online option. So if the going to the conference was a $500 ticket, getting a ticket for the online conference is only a $100 ticket. So now we go sign up 500 people at $100 a piece. That's a substantial new revenue stream that just a couple of years ago would not have existed. But probably even a more striking example would be charitable organizations. We do a lot of work for Rotary. And so when we look at the auction that's coming up, the Alderwood Terrace auction that's coming up here that we're working on, that's going to be a broadcast situation. Not only do they get revenue from remote people buying tickets to the event and tuning in, but if all of us have been to charity events, what do? Right? They raise the paddle, they do this, they do that. There's all of these events that happen. And if your remote audience can't tune in, chances are they're not raising a paddle. They're not participating. And those are substantial revenue streams that I would say it's a good thing. So even moving forward, let's say we're 2 years down the road and pandemic is over and behind us, those charitable organizations are still going to be streaming their events because they've broadened their audience. They've got people from Chicago and Miami and all over the world coming into their event to participate. So that's what we mean by new revenue streams: selling tickets, raising money.
Good point. This question is, let's see, from Corey Armstrong, Haas. And so it's for both of you, but Matt, you're welcome to start off. Here at Volunteers of America, we have produced some authentic local content for social media, but I've seen and observed that those stories or videos do not get in front of all of our FB or IG audiences. More tech companies prioritize boosted or paid for posts. Can you comment on what you've seen? Matt, take it away.
Sure. On Facebook, it's very much pay to play. They throttle back the organic reach. Anybody who's posted on Facebook and you have an audience, 500 likes and your post reached 4 people, yay, has seen this. So they intentionally do that, and they do that because they want you to have some component of Facebook advertising. I know for the various companies we work with, organizations, there's only one, and that's a city, who does not participate in some form of boosting posts, Facebook advertising, or a combination thereof. So that to me is just a reality of it. I will also add that Instagram is somewhat different since it is newer to the Facebook family. They have not throttled back Instagram reach nearly as much as they have over on Facebook. So I know we've actually worked with brands where they've not really had any advertising and they've still been able to grow and reach a widening audience. At some point, I'm sure that Facebook will change that, but for now, that's the lay of the land.
Randall, thoughts?
Well, just real quick, Mayor Tolbert in Arlington has been leading an initiative during the pandemic called Shop Local Arlington. So I want to echo Mac's comments that when we produce videos that promote businesses on Shop Local Arlington, and we put those in social media, be it on Facebook or Instagram, and we just do modest boosting, targeted boosting of those posts. We meet every 2 weeks and we analyze the results and we analyze analytics, and we can clearly see enormous traffic bumps, both to the website and in social media every time we post those videos. So it is effective. And if it's If it's not working for you, then it might be just some tweaking of the audience that you're targeting or how you're going about boosting those posts. But if you want to get in front of a local audience, you can do that very effectively and very inexpensively by doing Facebook and social media posting, boosted posting.
Great. Okay, this question is for Randall. So in your presentation, you had a panoramic picture on your opening and closing slide. Can you kind of describe what that was?
Well, I always like being complimented by that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to share my screen real quick. I think I can share that photo. It's an interesting photo just in the sense that this is Linwood City Center. It's a panoramic photo that we captured last year. It's Linwood City Center. It's interesting. It's about a 200-degree panoramic photo. It shows both the Cascade Mountains there on the left and the Olympic Mountains on the right. Mount Rainier dead center, and that is the Linwood City Center project, just dead center in the photo. It has been picked up. We see it in all kinds of media sources, but we didn't put any copyright on it or anything. So last time I saw it was even hanging over at Linwood City Hall. It's a nice shot. If anybody would like a copy of it, shoot me an email. I'm happy to share it.
That's gorgeous, actually. Thanks for sharing that. We have a question from Dan Ernest from the city of Everett. Any easy tricks to broaden your online presence for different age groups, boomers, millennials, etc.? Matt, you want to start off on this one?
I'd be happy to. A couple of thoughts on that. So you have to understand that, and we're speaking kind of in generational generalities, that as you go younger, the communication mode can change. So for example, those under 30, we see a lot more proclivity to texting as opposed to calling or perish the thought filling out a contact form. More of that immediately, I just want to send off a message and just, have it out there. And then I want to hear back in the same way. So for example, whenever you think about different generations, how does your site accommodate those? Do you have options where there's somebody where if they wanted to, they have an option if they wanted to text? No, of course, they actually can still call. I actually know we have there's a downtown Seattle law firm that caters to younger crowds. They have their texting channel and they have a service that everything routes right in there. You can text right off the website. You can even text on the desktop even if you want to. So they were able to serve that audience that way. So you can think of communication mode. That's one way. And does your site serve that? The other thing then would be over on social media, and that's understand the demographics that are active. So for example, Instagram, other ones like TikTok, skew incredibly young. If tween to teen, in the early 20s, you got Instagram on there. Then kind of Twitter, a little bit kind of as overlap there. Facebook is the widest in regards to age groups. You can find almost anybody on it. And then also on LinkedIn, more the professional side of things, probably have like the oldest average in regards to age. So it's kind of about where you want to be and be able to put that energy and then relate that back to whatever your demographic goals are.
Hey, Randall, before you chime in here, Matt, are you seeing organizations use TikTok now on a regular basis on their social media? Are they diving into that a little bit more?
We have. We've seen one, which is more in the entertainment, which is to be expected. We've seen another one, which is in medical, which is not something that everyone would expect. So that's kind of the Wild West right now in social media, at least as things stand right now. Thank
you. Okay, Randall, any thoughts there?
Well, it's just not really our audience. So no, I can't think of any of our clients with the exception of City Park events, not doing anything with TikTok at all. And just one interesting thing that we've noticed, especially over the last 6 months, we're seeing an exodus from Twitter. We've actually had probably, I'd say 25% of our clients instruct us no more. We've even had a couple of our clients leave social media altogether, which is to us stunning. So that there are changes. Don't know if it's politically driven or people are just tired of being in the fight, but
right.
We're seeing those kinds of things. As far as targeting your market, I get back right to what Matt was talking about. The ability to really hone down and target your audience in social media paid advertising is excellent. If you only want to reach 21-year-olds that live in Everett, you can do that.
Okay. Another question from Peter Fricks. It looks like it is asking any tips or ideas to reach executive leadership institutions, city, schools, ports, large commercial companies. Much appreciated. Free doc. Who wants to take that one on? I'll leave it. I'll toss
Uh,
that.
So I would just, of course, it is our business. So I would talk about video production. You can't see people in person today, so you've got to find a way face to face to connect with them, right? So I would look at video, and then how do you distribute that video and get that video to people? I will tell you, in public sector and nonprofit, over the past year, the executives that we work with are swamped. It's probably the worst time in the history of business to try and reach people in a sales capacity. I don't know, do any of you experience this? You're going through your email box in the morning and you don't even stop. It's delete, 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 right? You spend the first 2 minutes of your day just deleting stuff because who's got time for it? So you've got to find new and creative ways to get your face and your story and your message in front of that audience.
I totally agree. Matt, you have any thoughts there?
The only thing I would actually add on there is that, and this actually is going to echo some, is that on LinkedIn, you can do advertising campaigns and you can relate that back to job titles and positions. So yeah, you can target the executive managers and the executive leadership. But as Randall was saying, a lot of those folks are really busy and they may not respond to that. So I know we actually have a client right now who wants to talk to some of those folks, and that's great. So our first question was, okay, give us all the job titles of the people you want to talk to. Okay, that's fine. All right, now give us all the job titles of people you feel would be decision makers and or have time to actually see and respond to what you want to put out there. So you can do that type of targeting on LinkedIn. We've had some people that's been really successful, other people who haven't, who have had different experiences. That's something you can do, but you have to consider though how often you click on those types of things to keep things real, because people are incredibly busy, but you can target by job title.
Good point. Good point. Randall, this question is directed towards you, but Matt, you're welcome to chime in as well. Logistically, what changes are you seeing to planning in-person events, and what impact is the online factor having on your planning?
This is the one that drives my business manager crazy because we keep spending money. So if you picture a large conference in person, traditionally, our customer is that local audience. We're playing to that local audience. We want their experience to be fantastic. Now we have a whole nother audience, and that doesn't just include additional staff, but we're now buying, remote cameras and all of the equipment that is required to go back to a control booth during a show to control those cameras. And on top of that, if we've got 5 video wall screens in front of the audience, now we've got another one over here that's just going to our online audience. How do you produce that? How do you make sure that those people online are getting the same or at least close to the same experience? It has completely disrupted how you produce events.
Before you chime in, Matt, I had an experience just last December. I was asked to present at a leadership event in the Omaha area. It was tied to one of those major events where they had Steve Harvey and others doing presentations, but it was virtual mostly. They were operating in Atlanta, and then I was presenting at a zoo in Omaha. And so there was a virtual audience and then an in-person audience. Now, the hiccup was I was all into my presentation. I did everything they asked me to do. The local audience loved it. The audience that was virtual, they loved it. And then at the very end, when it was over, and I felt like, yes, that was great. The program folks said, you know what, we couldn't record it. We made a mistake and we didn't record it. So they didn't have it because their follow-up is important, right? In this digital era where you can't be in person, you got to get that follow-up to make sure everyone can access it. And so it was a huge mishap, and that content was gone.
Oh, so that's a good point, Gary. So we record out of every camera so that it's not just the people who are there and who watch it live, but you've got a really big audience that comes in and watches later. Just I'm sure we're recording this morning and more people will come and watch it later. The STEM event that we talked about earlier, I think 400 people have viewed the event post-event. So it's a real critical thing to be able to record that. But some of our live events are completely pre-recorded up front. So there is no room for error. And as the audience comes and logs on and attends the event, they're seeing what looks like a live event. Every single bit of it is pre-recorded. I mentioned Adobe Max earlier. That entire event was pre-recorded with the exception of the breakout sessions where you went into, you went into class, if you will, on whatever particular topic. But Conan O'Brien led that conference. It was very, very well done, but it's all in the can. You don't have any worries about how your show is going to come off. You've already seen it.
I mean, Matt, before you chime in, I felt like it was some sort of a planned conspiracy because I'm sure Steve Harvey's presentation was recorded, but mine wasn't. So I felt slighted a little bit there. But go ahead, Matt.
Oh no, nothing really to add except that's a very sad story. I'm sorry that happened.
Okay, Matt, I have another question for you before we wrap up. How long does it take typically to see the results from an SEO effort? So chime in as you'd like.
There will be no definitive time frame for those of you who are hoping for 19 days. I can't say that. What I can share is the experiences that we have seen in what we've worked on, both ourselves and also in partnership with other companies. We have seen some companies that were virtually invisible online see results, leads, business generated within a month. Oftentimes they're starting from virtually nothing. I will say they have that in common. So there's only room for improvement, but we have seen it that quickly. Now, on the other hand, in other industries which are competitive. So I know that we had a manufacturing client and they have very steep competition. And we could see where their competition was, which was up on the heights where they were down on the ground. They took upwards of like 5 or 6 months of steady, aggressive SEO work. But then when the results came in, I mean, it was very much night and day to where they were virtually getting nothing because they were on page 2 of Google. And then they finally vaulted over to page 1 in a highly competitive online landscape. So, I mean, I'd say that's probably like those are the two extremes. Oftentimes it's more like in the middle in the several month thing where you start to see stuff, but it really will vary. It'll vary based on what your online competition is like, what the current presence looks like as well.
Okay. All right. I have 2 final questions for each of you, and then I would love it if Randall, you follow up after Matt for closing remarks. So Matt, I'll ask you the first question. Randall, then I'll follow up with a question to you. Then Matt, you'll give your closing remarks, and then the same for Randall. Sound good?
Great.
All right. So Matt, another question for you is for the audience. As a takeaway, what would be the biggest impact on their website? What is it that would be the largest impact on their website?
The largest impact is that the content on there needs to represent you and where your business is now. It should be speaking to April 2021, not February, not December, or perish the thought April 2020. It really needs to be current and reflect where you are now, what you are doing now. And just I guess the only sequel comment on that would be is that needs to be a top priority for the rest of 2021, just because we are in such a changeable environment. Phase 2, phase 3, 2 again, or 4 again, who knows? It's going to continue to change. And you're just going to have to make sure that your online presence reflects that.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. All right, Randall, final question for you. I guess this is tied to revenue generation, right? So we're talking about online events. You mentioned new revenue streams as a driver for future growth in online events. Can you please give us some examples of this?
Oh, Gary, I think I may already have done that. So we were talking about the new revenue streams. So ticket sales was a new revenue streams, the ability to sell those online tickets. And then for nonprofit organizations, the ability to raise money from people who are not in the room. I would say that those would be the 2 big drivers.
That's right. So Randall, since you've answered that question twice, are you willing to give us some insight as to maybe a major activity or event that you all are planning to work on in the near future? Is there something coming up that Southland's working on that people should be aware of?
Well, locally, I'd say what's kind of cool is that we are planning to get back to work. We're working on the Arlington Fly-In was gone last year. It's back this year. It's going to be in August. It's going to be a drive-in event. You can count on an air show and a bunch of cool things. But the hundreds of volunteers who put that big show on every year in Arlington have completely had to adapt. So it's going to be fun. Everybody should turn out for it. It's going to be a great time. The city of Shoreline is working on a movie festival, so we'll be doing outdoor movies in the month of July over in the city of Shoreline. That's something really to look forward to. And our calendar for in-person conference events for fourth quarter this year and moving into 2022, we're starting to fill up. So I want to leave everybody with a really optimistic outlook. This too shall pass. Don't give up. Don't surrender. We're going to get through this just fine.
Thank you, Randall. Okay, Matt, closing remarks to our wonderful audience that's still on with us.
Yeah, and this is, I guess I would put this out there as homework for everyone. I mean, for everyone who's on the call, and I mean, you're on here today, and it's a testament that you're participating in this. It's great. It's great to have this engagement, and thank you everyone for the questions. Those were very interesting, very topical. But your homework is to run some Google searches. Run some Google searches on you as an individual, especially those who are synonymous with your brand, and run some Google searches for the business name. And then you have to answer the question, are you happy with what comes up? Are you happy with that top website, which ranks number one, hopefully yours? Are you happy with the online reviews or lack thereof? And also, are you happy with the social media links, which if you're active on even a couple of these, likely those will be in the top 10 somewhere. And for people that go to those sites, that's where they live and that's where they spend their online energy. That's where they're going to go. They'll skip the website entirely. Are you then happy with what you see? And if you're not, then really 2021 for you becomes, it's a planning exercise. As you're coming out of the pandemic and as you're reaching a new normal, your online presence will also simultaneously be reaching that new normal where when you repeat that exercise, you are happy with what you see.
That's awesome. Thanks for being here today, Matt. I learned a lot and I really love what Supercharged is about and plans to do. So I really appreciate the insight and knowledge. Randall, please take it away for final closing remarks.
Well, thanks again for inviting me and and having me this morning. I agree completely with what Matt has said. I would also say that if somebody lands on your website, right up front, give them a reason to contact you and give them a way to contact you. Right? If somebody's laying in their bed at 10 o'clock at night, flipping through on their phone and they see your website and you've piqued their interest, make sure that right there they can contact you, that they can just send a note or whatever, because people don't really like to pick up the phone that much anymore. Other than that, I wish you all well and I wish you luck. Stay healthy, and I will see you on the next coffee chat.
That's awesome. Thank you, Randall. All right, folks, we have something going on this Thursday. Yay, 4 to 5 p.m., April 22nd. We're going to have a business after hours. That's right. And it's called Networking at the Disco. Ding, 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 ding. So remember, you want to join us for that. It would be awesome. And then we'd also like to make sure this is a segue from these amazing individuals, Matt and Randall, Southam and Supercharged Marketing. We're talking about broadband access next week, April 27th. And we hope that we could have you all back again to ask some great questions. So thank you, Matt and Randall, for your insight. Thank you, everyone. Please hold up your coffee to salute Matt and Randall and have a great, amazing day. Thanks to all of you from Economic Alliance, Snohomish County Coffee Chats. Peace.
Bye, everybody. See you.